There we go. Hi, everyone. Hi,
Hi,
everybody. We
hi.
we are live on Zoom right now. If you're watching this on YouTube later, it's not live, but it's going to be a great conversation. So stick with us. So I'm going to just jabber on for a minute. But I was telling Michelle when I started this, Rachel, Zoom likes to change stuff on us like every time. And this
Yep.
time they put everybody in a weight room. I don't know, but you're all here, and I'm happy you're all here. And we're here
Oh,
with Michelle, and we're here with Rachel.
yeah.
So we all got here. So Michelle, well, I always like to start out with I'm Julie Savinsky. I'm the director of events. I'm actually in my home office, but Warwick's is located in La Jolla, San Diego area of California. But Michelle, you actually live in England, but where are you calling in from right now?
So I'm in Anaheim,
Okay.
and I am here for not book reasons, but it happened. The reason I'm here happened to it just coincide with my book release, and so that my publishing house has been wonderful in their support, even though it was last minute my trip here, and I have been able to pop around to the bookstores around me in Anaheim.
Wow.
We're planning to go to Los Angeles with some really cute Sound of Music totes, and
Super fun.
yeah, giving away some Sound of Music canvas totes for people who purchase the
They're
book.
really cute. I saw them on your social media.
Yeah.
Oh, fun. So, but
Uh,
normally where in England do you live?
I am in Cambridgeshire, and that is, most people just think of Cambridge and the university.
Okay.
It is a medieval city, and it's absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Oh, love it. I
It,
just love that. Oh, I mean, it's like one of those dreams I have.
it is. It's actually a dream. We had the option of moving anywhere in the UK, and we chose Cambridge because of the diversity and because of the history and
And it's so accessible to everything.
Right.
everything. 1 hour from London. You
Oh,
just
love it.
hop on
Wonderful.
a train and you're there.
Oh, love it. And Rachel, as everyone knows, and I'll get this into my intro. If you haven't seen us already and you're new to us here, Rachel and I do a lot of these virtual events.
We do.
Rachel, you are calling in from?
I'm in Toronto and it's so hot and humid and I hate it. But what do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do?
So for those of you that are watching, I have the chat open. If it gets unruly, I'll turn it off, but you all have fun chatting because I think that you're all great people in this. But then in the chat is where I'm going to put how to order Michelle's book. On is where you'll do that. But if you have a question, there's a little button. I know we're all used to Zoom and everything, but there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A button for her because I might not have a chance to like scroll through everything. Rachel and Michelle are going to talk about 30-ish minutes, and then I'll bring those questions to you. So it looks like we have people calling in from all over. We've got Maine, Ontario, Dallas. Everybody's calling in from everywhere. So welcome and thank you for being here. So amazing. So let me do my job and then I'll go away. So Michelle Moran is the internationally best-selling author of 8 historical novels, a California native with a master's in education. She was inspired to write historical novels by her experiences on archaeological digs. Her novels translated into more than 20 languages, including Nefertiti, The Heretic Queen, Cleopatra's Daughter, Madame Tussaud, The Second Empress, Rebel Queen, and Mata Hari's Last Dance. She is a frequent traveler, and as she says, she lives in England, where she is researching her 9th book. So love that. And as we said, she's here today. I don't actually said what book we're here today for, but she is here today to talk about her new book, Maria.
Yeah.
Yay! Yep, there it is. There it is. And joining her is our ever favorite Rachel McMillan. Rachel is the author of several historical and contemporary novels, including The London Restoration and The Mozart Code. She's a literary agent and all-around busiest person in the industry, if you ask me. And we're so lucky that she does these events with us. So thank you, Rachel. And Michelle, have a wonderful conversation. See you in a little bit.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And Rachel, if you have not read Rachel's books, you are missing out in a big way. Mozart Code is one of my favorite books. She brings
That's so nice.
Oh, it's so good. And if you love, even if you don't love, or if you're unfamiliar with the cities of Vienna and Prague, she makes them come alive as if they're characters in the book. It's so beautiful. It will make you want to book the next trip to Vienna or Prague or both. And cannot highly recommend it. I like so highly recommended. Cannot recommend it enough. The Mozart Code, so good.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, and if you're in Vienna, you take the train up to Salzburg, obviously. And it's really cool to see so many people from so many places because this is obviously a topic that I believe that I knew the lyrics to Sound of Music and I knew all the songs and was singing them before I actually remember anything else. I think for many of us, it's one of our first musical memories. And it's especially important to my family because my Oma was a war bride from Holland. The Canadians liberated Holland. And she came back, married my grandfather, settled here in Ontario. And she passed away when I was a toddler. But The Sound of Music was the first film she ever saw at a movie theater. She loved it. And her dream trip was Austria to Maria's land, and she got to go the year before she died. So I, by osmosis, inherited that passion for that country. And it's really interesting that this is your first book after many years of no books, because you have a busy life, you have kids, you've moved to another country. It's your first book in several years and set in such a completely different time and universe from some of the iconic figures and time periods you've written before. Where did Maria come from?
Oh, so you're right. It is so different from my Egypt books.
Yeah.
Madame Tussaud is set in the French Revolution. Honestly, I was the Sound of Music for me. I couldn't. There are some amazing fans out there. And I have to tell you that I probably saw it before I had kids, maybe half a dozen times. I loved the movie, loved Julie Andrews, knew all the songs, but was not someone who had ever. I didn't perform Maria. I didn't. I couldn't tell you all the lines in the movie. And I know some people can. They are mega.
Oh yeah.
I had kids. I don't know how many times we watched it. So many times. And it started in the pandemic, and I started to wonder about the real Maria. I knew it was based on a real woman. I knew that there was a story there. And the more we watched it, the more I thought about it, the more I wondered, was she someone as cheerful as she was portrayed? Taking on 7 kids, that's a huge responsibility.
That's many kids.
Many kids in her early 20s. And in her early 20s. I mean, could you imagine? Could you imagine being prepared, or would any of us be prepared to take on 7 children and a husband who was 25 years her senior, and a giant estate? In your early 20s, she really knew very little about the world at that point. And so I really wondered what also the relationship was like between Maria and the 7 children. You even 2 children, their personalities are vastly different. How they respond to you as a parent is vastly different. Anyone who has kids knows that no 2 are alike. You can't parent the 2 the same. Try 7. And
7 who are not her own children, right?
Your own, have a whole history and have baggage, and whose mother passed away. There was a lot of baggage there, and the father, because he was so traumatized actually by his first wife's passing, they were a real love match, just kept leaving the family. He was not how he was portrayed in the movie. He was a real softie, and just couldn't handle seeing the kids so shattered. And so he would remove himself on business trips and not be gone for 6 weeks or 8 weeks at a time, and then come back. And the whole thing was an actual mess. When she got there, the real Maria von Trapp, and so that was really intriguing to me.
And we'll get more into it later, a few questions down, because I think a lot of you, when you read this book, will be surprised that, yes, we are all collectively in love with Christopher Plummer, especially in my country, because he's ours. But Georg and Maria were not a love match, and we'll talk later about that. I also think that it's really important for this book to come out when a conversation is happening in America around what value people have if their children are their own or if their children are not their own. There's a lot of dialogue and discourse around it right now, and I think Maria's story can hopefully, and I'm not getting political, at least shine a light on the many different ways in which women become mothers. And she is an ultimate mother figure for so many who grew up with that film, and an important one. And yet her strength is very, very different. It's a more quiet strength than the other women you have written, like Mata Hari and like Nefertiti, women whose strength is a more visceral one than a nun who marries into a family and becomes a governess slash what. It's such a different kind of strong woman in a far softer tone. How were you able to switch from one type of strength in women like Mata Hari, oh my gosh, to Maria, who is a very different kind,
What a
very different type?
question. I've honestly never thought of it that way. I believe Maria saw her strength as coming from her faith in God.
Yeah.
She was so close to taking her vows. She desperately wanted to take her vows. Even when she married, you can see this in her memoirs. And she wrote two of them, and one in 1949, one in 1972. And in her memoirs, she talks about how when she was so naive, honestly, and so innocent that when she married George, she thought she was just going to marry him, and she was going to parent the kids until they were old enough to be done being parented, and then she'd go back and become a nun.
She was on a timeline. She's like, okay, peace out.
She didn't have a clue about what was really in store for her. And she was someone who drew heavily from her faith. And I think that switch was easy to make because she was as powerful as Nefertiti in her mind. And that's really all it took. Without her belief in their singing career, in their ability to survive the 1929 crash, when they lost all their money, that family would not have survived in the way they did. In fact, had she not been so driven in her pursuit of becoming a family that sang together and becoming a choir that was marketable, that could sing in different places and be paid, they would not have gotten out of Austria. Some of the children believed that they probably would have died in Austria in concentration camps, if not for her.
And that's part of, and this book, you all have to read this book because it picks up in Maria, the real Maria's timeline, and not the Hammerstein timeline. So you read a lot about her formative years and the fact that she was an entrepreneur in ways. And I feel that there is a disconnect between the Von Trapps that are Disneyfied in the film and the Von Trapps. I know people whose parents shut off the movie before the end where the Nazis are trying to find them. I know people like myself who were a teenager before they realized that Rolf was a Hitler Youth, because there's almost a nostalgic, beautiful color tone to Salzburg that when you're young and seeing it, your brain is not turning on to all of the things that are happening. And I think that this book gives us a story of resilience that goes beyond a few happy tunes, right? And I think that that's something you do so well. Did you approach the story and the research in the same way you have every other book, or did it require something different given the many layers of the Hammerstein estate, of Maria being in a different time? I mean, the 20th century, it's a little bit more recognizable, say, to you than some of the worlds that you've written before.
It is different research because with Nefertiti, my first book, there were no written records. There's no one to verify what
Yeah.
she said. With the Von Trapps, not only do you have all sorts of people who are alive who remember meeting her, you have her own memoirs. So,
Yes.
this is what you are, what I really had to look at and say, okay, what is memoirs, of course, are filtered through her own perspective. It's impossible to be a third person looking into her own life. She did the best she could in her memoirs. I looked at her also daughter's memoir, and just to try and figure out, okay, who was the real Maria? And it was very interesting what people felt also who had interacted with her when she moved to America. She was a force to be reckoned with. She decided, for example, that she was going to have a cameo in the Sound of Music film after when it started being filmed, and she flew herself to Austria and she appeared on the set. And indeed, she has a cameo, but she was not invited for that cameo. She, rightly or wrongly so, it seems like something they would have wanted to have done. I think they were a little afraid of her. I think producers found her a big personality who knew what she wanted, and they were scared, especially since they had changed so much of her story.
Yeah.
She was not afraid to put her hand on her hip and just go, and they didn't want to hear it.
And I think you can't help but draw parallels between this story for readers and P.L. Travers and the author of Mary Poppins and the Disney conception versus her conception of the story. And they made a film about it that
But Tom Hanks,
trivializes it a bit. But yes, I kept thinking of that, the whole, you're telling my story, I own my story. And it's very interesting. And Maria is one of the ultimate iconic figures of the 20th century. Everybody knows. And that's why I'm just glad they went all out and put her dancing on the hill and spinning on the hill,
so
because
sad.
we all know that.
And that was not the original cover. The original cover
Oh,
was
interesting.
very different. But we fought for that cover, my agent and I, and begged to have something more iconic on the cover.
Let's sell some books, people. Like, do
you
you want to sell a book?
Yes, you don't even have to have the title on there. You already know, even without title, this who it is.
I know this book. And
Of course.
people obviously have very strong opinions about her from the fictional depiction, from the fact that she became a part of people's families when they watch it every Easter, every Christmas. When you were going after her real life, where did you start in finding the Maria beyond the celebrity? Did you start with the memoirs? Where were you like, okay, this is a huge giant thing I'm taking on? And I have to say, and I'm not diminishing the book readers by this, it is a giant topic, but it's a very readable book. You will love it and not want to put it down. It's a wonderfully accessible look into a gigantic life. So where did you start with Maria?
I started with her memoirs, definitely. I wanted to see, obviously, I mean, there's nothing more important, right, than someone's memoirs.
Yeah.
And to see what it was that she found important about her own life, what she remembered. So much of it is talking about her time at the Abbey, her really strong desire to have taken her vows. I don't know that she ever came to terms with the fact that she didn't take her vows. She was always glad that she married George. She was always glad to have been a mother to 10 children, not 7.
Right.
And because she would end up having 3 of her own, and with George. And so she had a family. It was a very, very big family. And really reading and listening to what she had to say. She did interviews. There are still interviews online that you can see with her. And of course, there are her grandchildren and her children, one of whom is still alive. There are her grandchildren, and some of her grandchildren and great grandchildren continue to sing. really trying to get a well-rounded picture of what everyone felt. And so that included people who worked with her on sets, that included people who worked with her as the head of her family singing group, people who just had run-ins with her at the family lodge in Vermont. All of these were really important to try and get a handle on who was the real Maria von Trapp.
Because it is such a legacy. And one of the interesting things you do is it's not all told in Maria's voice. It is also juxtaposed with secretary to Hammerstein, Fran, who is in real time on the page crafting this iconography as she listens to Maria's story. And how did you choose to have that almost third party who is capturing Maria's story to filter it to us, intertwined with Maria's voice herself?
So I could have just done Maria's voice. And I know that would have been the much easier thing to do, but I thought Maria already had memoirs. Who am I to just rewrite her memoirs? This has to be told from a bigger perspective, and that Fran's voice needed to come in to listen to what she was upset about. And she had real legitimate concerns in 1958 and 59 about this play that was going to be put on. She had sold her rights to a German movie producer long before, many, many years before, for $10,000. And they own the rights, and they are the ones who really wrote the original Sound of Music. Much of what the Rogers and Hammerstein play is based on is that German film. And so they were the ones who decided that George would be this really stern character. And the family was really upset about it because, I mean, imagine that your father who was this amazing, kind, soft-hearted man, and your stepmother who was more stern and driven and ambitious. Their roles are completely reversed, and then it's blasted out to the entire universe. And this is the story everyone thinks about your family. It was hurtful to them, to the children. And I think they were upset with Maria. And it wasn't honestly her fault. She didn't choose that. She didn't write the script. She didn't put out the film. And there was nothing she could do about it. She had sold her rights. And in fact, when the Broadway play is produced, they have to go to the Germans to get the rights and the approval, and not Maria. They tracked Maria down, and it took a long time to track her down, thinking that she was the one who held the rights. And it turned out she did not hold the rights at all.
Oh, and I always think of you as an archaeologist because I just can always picture you digging through research and choosing which portions to show us of these rather remarkable figures. And for me, it was a really fun, almost meta thing to have you write Fran with this wonderful irony that you use her as experiencing the story and dictating it, because you have the same authorial intrusion when you are researching. I just
not lost on me.
I loved that was part of it. It was almost like you could have a stand-in. Did you play with a few different points of view before settling on Fran and Maria, or did you just think Fran is a wonderful way to transport people into this story?
I did not actually play with different points of view. I would love to have included more Hammerstein. And I do have one extremely awkward chapter that is just, and I know it's awkward, and I'm okay with it.
Sometimes they are awkward. It happens.
My editor was like, "You sure you want to do this?" And I just thought, I'm here for this. I'm here for all the awkward. I'm doing this, and I have one chapter that is from Hammerstein's point of view.
Yes,
because I just thought, I don't care, and I want to get it out there.
Take that, Goodreads. Goodreads 2 stars that will say,
that's right. That's
where did
right.
Hammerstein
I
guy
know.
come from?
I know it's strange, but I had to do it because I think if I hadn't done Fran, I would have loved to have done Oscar Hammerstein. He was an amazing, amazing human being, and he genuinely believed that. I mean, he didn't have an easy. He came from a lot of money, but he did not have an easy life emotionally, and but he had this hope that was truly Maria from the Sound of Music film like and play. I feel like channeled some of himself into that character.
That just relentless optimism and kind wisdom, which I just love, and which is why we all love this story.
Yes.
Doubtless you had to get some rights and permissions, especially from the Hammerstein estate. What did that process look like? Like readers, you should know, viewers, you should know, with some of these huge things, you can't just decide, I'm going to go and write this today, without jumping through a few hoops. So where did that process start? Can you, and obviously, if there's anything confidential, please don't feel that you have to, but is there any insight you can give us into what that process looked like?
So the insight is that there were nothing. We did nothing.
That's amazing. Here I was thinking, okay, she probably had to.
No, the truth is, because I did not include giant portions of lyrics. I include the name of songs. I reference songs, but there are no.
We all know them anyway. I mean, I've seen them at chat.
Exactly. You just have to hit at it. Sound of Music fans are such fans. They are such strong fans. There's no need. They know exactly what's being written about. And so no, I didn't want to go there. Because as you say, that could be extremely tricky. And so no.
That's it. You did it very cleverly. It's hard when you're writing real people. I'm in awe of people who can write biographical characters, because you, like Hammerstein, are taking the step into something, but in this case you are trying to bridge the gap, the very wide gap between the truth of her story and the fiction, which I like to think of not as a misinterpretation so much as an idealistic lens of the best parts of what the story could look like to people. And that must have been a daunting task of revealing the history of a beloved character who exists beyond the life made for her on stage and film. We all want optimistic, sunny Maria who makes curtain clothes, and you have to be like, well,
oh, she did
actually,
exactly, yeah. She did make the curtain clothes, but the rest of it, not so much. That was really scary because I thought, I don't want to also alienate people and make them fling books, because that isn't the truth. She was not, nobody could live up to Julie Andrews. Nobody's living up to that. But she also, in some ways, and she did come in and she was young and full of energy, and she was there to be, she was not a governess, actually. It's easy to call her this, but she was truly a tutor for just one of the children. And she eventually just became a bigger and bigger and bigger figure in their life. And she was extraordinary. She was extraordinary, even though she was not Julie Andrews extraordinary. And let's face it, nobody is Julie Andrews extraordinary.
That's a different kind of extraordinary.
Yes.
And was there anything, because of time or editorial influence or the pacing of the book, that you had to cut about Maria's life that you really wanted to include? I bet there was a wealth of information. Was there anything that kind of broke your heart to be like, yeah, this isn't going in?
Her time in America, more about her time in America. She toured with her family. When she arrived in America, she arrives in Ellis Island, and she has this.
There's nothing more, I mean, iconic than that, right?
She arrived in Ellis Island, and she gets to Ellis Island, and the man interviewing her says, well, how long you think you're going to be here? Things are going poorly in Austria. At that point, they're really in their heads, fleeing. And she looks at the man and goes, "Well, how long we're going to be here? I mean, I hope forever." What could not have been the more, there couldn't have been a worse response. And she laughs at herself in her memoir thinking about this, because she knows, like, I think there was just silence after that, and everyone went, "Oh God." And they were taken, and they were not allowed in the country. They had to actually, there was a whole series of hoops they had to jump through to get released into the country for their tour, and to eventually move here. And the person who actually greased those wheels was the Secretary of State for FDR, Francis Perkins.
Who is a new book by Stephanie Dray.
Yes, Becoming Madam Secretary.
Absolutely. Whoa.
I know. Everything just 3 degrees of separation. And so it was an extraordinary thing for her to come to America. They had $4 in their bank account with them. They had $4. They came to America with $4. They had this enormous estate. They had so much in Austria, and they left it all. They left all of it. They had already lost a great deal of wealth in the crash, investing in a bank that failed in Austria, taking their money out of the Bank of England so that they could support something more local. And George was doing it as a favor to a friend. They lost every single they lost everything. They lost all of their property, all of their money, except the villa. And they had to leave that villa behind, and it ended up being taken over by the Nazis. And later, after the war, when they were asked if they wanted it back, they actually said no. It had gone through so many changes in the war, and it had just terrible memories, I think, inside. They just felt there was some bad energy of what
they just closed that chapter.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
I've done a lot of research in Austria post-war. Like, that's kind of my thing with Mozart Code, is the war did not end in Austria in 1945. I think that's so when we think about people leaving, did they go back? It's not that easy. As Michelle has just said, Hollywood never focuses on the months and years of paperwork it takes to do anything. And just for the Von Trapps didn't just happily skip over the mountains and get to America and have a chalet in Vermont. And I wondered, was there one surprising thing you learned beyond I'm sure there's a million, but was there one thing about Maria that you learned that was so different than your conception of her from the media?
Oh, so many things. I think that she was fragile. She had
interesting,
difficult childhood. She doesn't come across as fragile. She comes across as driven, in some ways, a stage mom. And the truth is, she was always chasing the dream of being loved. Such a really rough childhood in terms of her mother dying and her father abandoning her emotionally and physically. Then showing back up in her life, but just kidding, just for a little bit. It was really hard. And so I think she decided, I think that a built-in family was a beautiful thing for her. And I think she really relished her role, of being a mom. She also was fragile, though. And when you are fragile emotionally and need the love, it can sometimes be hard to provide unconditional love when you're so busy searching for it.
And we have in this book, not just obviously the challenge of living in Austria during World War II and the need for the Von Trapps to escape, but you also go into the Weimar years in Austria, that period that led up to the crash. And I think that it gives a really robust look at, sometimes I think we can look back and think, oh, it must have been horrible in this time period. Maria was born into a really interesting time in the world that she lived in. And to add to all of the sociocultural and war and poverty aspects of her life, then, as you say, the search for love and perhaps even the commitment to love she would find if she had taken her vows and had been in the nunnery and gone that path. And you and I have both talked about how, I mean, I spend quite a lot of time in Austria because it is my heart city and my muse, and I write it a lot.
And you do it so well.
I love it so much. And there will be more Austria in future books from me because I've been with my publisher and I was like, I'll write you the
I know you're doing Paris right now.
I'm doing Paris and Rouen, which is fine. But then I'm like, but then can I go back to Austria, please? And I know that you had quite a wonderful research trip with your family in Salzburg. Not everyone has had the opportunity to go to these places, so I entreat you to go to Michelle's Instagram and her Facebook, where you can see photos of this. What was it like stepping into Maria's shoes after spending so much time with her imaginatively?
I was shocked, actually. It is First, I've been to Salzburg many times, but this trip was completely different because now you're going with an eye to the person you've written about, someone who really lived, who really inhabited the city. And she is everywhere. She is in more places, I would say, than Mozart.
I was just going to bring up Mozart because Mozart is usually my driving force, but I would say Salzburg is now Von Trapped.
Territory. I was in this shocked me the most about going back to Salzburg. I didn't remember it, or maybe I just was not paying attention. In my head, it was always exactly Mozart territory. But then I went and it was Maria everything, Maria bicycle tours, Maria bus tours, Maria everything, Maria walks, Maria. And it was like I was there for all of it. It did it all.
And I have to say, and we've talked about this as well, and we'll start getting to some questions, but an ironic thing that many people don't know is The Sound of Music is not something Austrians love. It's not their thing. They're very much doing this for tourists, but it only played there for a weekend. So it is very funny that this whole world is Maria, but that is catering to the North Americans and some Europeans who love this because it is not their thing. And just before we get to the questions here and continue to put them through, and if you're watching later, I'm willing to bet, because she's such a beautiful human, that Michelle wouldn't mind stopping by the YouTube channel and just answering there. Absolutely. She's so easy to find on social media, and Julie will get to that later. But I did want to wrap up talking about Maria's love story, because what I have in this book is not a love story in the type of a sweeping romance. She marries him for the love of the children and specifies that she grew to love him later. And I think that her love for God, her love for the Abbey, which is quite magnificent, probably one of my favorite parts of Salzburg. If you just go, oh my gosh, it is strikingly beautiful in a way that I don't feel any film can capture, but it tries. What message did you want people to take away from your vision of Maria?
That music can change lives.
Oh.
And that it is something that sustained her throughout a really hard childhood. It's something that literally sustained the family financially throughout their entire life in America. Their growing roots here in America life. That music transforms. It transformed her family from a family when they lost all of their money. They didn't know what to do. They started taking in boarders and into the villa and renting out some of their rooms to local students. And they met someone at one of the boarders who realized they had such a talent for singing. And this transformed their life. It's transformative. And anyone any teenager can tell you that it is transformative. So many people feel this way about music. And it doesn't matter what kind of music. I think that it is something that speaks to everyone's soul. And for her, that's what that and her faith in God is what sustained her. And I
I
think
love that.
the church is what partly also what drew her to the church was the beautiful music and the singing and being able to feel for her closer to God through music.
And Austria, and just outside of Salzburg is Abendorf, where Silent Night was written. And if you look into that story, it's almost like Austria breathes music even when it comes out of nowhere, and it happens even when it doesn't even intentionally exist. There is something about that place that just
Something about Austria, yes.
It's amazing. And Julie, I've got the questions up here, so like I've got the let's plow through them. Like,
That's fine.
boom.
There are a lot of them, but everybody in the chat is absolutely saying the best quote of the day is that music transforms lives, and it truly is. That's the quote of the day for sure. Just as an aside, because we have a lot of questions, but I can't help but tell this one. If any of you ever have the opportunity to go, I know that the story of Maria and the Hammer State is there's different things that are happening there, but as the beloved movie, if you ever get a chance to go and do one of the live where they show the movie live with the orchestra and singing. Okay, I did it at my daughters did it with me for my 60th
that would
birthday.
be so fun.
At the Hollywood Bowl. Okay, it was incredible. So, have you done it, Michelle?
I have not, and this is high on the bucket list. It is so high. They do it in England, and I know this is because I've looked it up. This is definitely something I want to take my kids to, especially.
So talking about transformative, I mean, I still remember, I still have chills. It's like there's couple thousand people in this audience singing and hissing, and I mean, it is
that's
just
so neat.
So if you all have a chance to do
I've
it.
done Amadeus with a full orchestra, and
Yeah.
that's powerful because it's like a wall of Mozart sound.
Right.
But
Sound of Music is
I'd like to tag on to that. Going to the Christmas markets in Salzburg is also an extraordinary experience. If you ever go to Salzburg to try and time it to Christmas, it's magical.
That's a magic one. All right, let's get to some questions because there's lots of them, and I hope we can get to all of them before we run out of time. So Elizabeth is asking, did you meet any of the family members of Maria while you were writing the book? I think that you might have touched on it a little bit.
I did not. I had the opportunity to reach out to their lodge, and I actually chose not to. I wanted to be able to tell the story from the research that I found and not have, I didn't want it to be something that when you're writing about someone who's living, it's very hard to do. And I wanted to be able to be impartial as much as I could. And I knew if I did this and I reached out that there was no way I could be impartial in the way that I wanted to be.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Because it would jade you in having then you have somebody else's idea of what needs to be honestly, said.
Look, there's no truth bomb. There's no, oh my gosh, so scandalous, she did this. There's none of those moments. She wasn't like that. She was truly a wonderful human being. And the family is wonderful, and they continue to sing. So there was no looking back. I could have, but I didn't know.
Okay, Dorothy has a question, and this is a really cute one. So, have you spoken to anyone who is present at a live concert of the Von Trapp family singers? Her mom, 99 years old, did hear and see them in the U.S. as a college student, and she remembers it vividly.
I have, and vivid is the word. I think once somebody hears them, they are fans for life. Yes, I actually talked to a number of people who, and partly thanks to Alison Pataki, the writer.
Okay.
She is the first person who set me up with someone who had met Maria, and everyone had great things to say about the family.
She's written about Austria. She wrote the duology about Empress Sisi back a while ago. So she's got a lot of Austria in her work as well, which is super fun.
Fantastic writer.
All right. And Becky has a question from Maria's viewpoint. And I think you touched on this a little bit. I was paying attention, but I was doing some other things in the background. From Maria's viewpoint, why did she not take her final vows? All I know is the Disney view, not convinced she was that flighty young girl as the movie depicts.
So she did not take her vows. She actually wanted to up until the very end, up until her marriage. She goes back to the nunnery after the proposal. He proposes to her, and she goes back, and the nuns truly. How do you solve a problem like Maria? I think that I think that is not too far from the truth. Actually, they were like, "This is a great idea. You should do it." And off she went, and she was kind of traumatized by that. She really could not understand why they didn't want her to stay and become a nun. And they said, look, this is up to you to do. It's your choice, but we are completely in support of you getting married. Maybe this is what God has called you to do. And maybe that's why you were called to this nunnery or to this abbey, is because maybe this was the path you were supposed to take. And she was deeply conflicted. It was not, as Rachel said, originally a love story. She talks about that in her memoir. But boy, did it become a love story as their marriage progressed. She learned to love him and love their life together. But originally she was scared.
I bet. I mean, you're young. It's there's a lot of things that are happening. And it's what was happening in her whole world at the time.
Yes, and in the 1920s, it was very different. This is not
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of paths for women. And there weren't certain things that it's like,
no.
Your paths were very limited. Okay, so Maria has a question. She would like, and she said in the chat, she was pretty funny in the chat. She said she used to have people sing the songs to her because her name is Maria. She wants to know, who is the narrator of the audiobook, and will it have any background music?
Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on who the narrator is, because it is I want to say, because there are two separate audio versions. There's one for the UK and there's one for the US, and I can't remember which is which. I believe it's Sandra Campbell. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Okay. I'm Googling.
Oh, there you go.
Move on. And
okay.
I will put this in the Q&A.
Yeah, I should know.
Yeah. And we have some questions that are kind of duplicates, so I'm gonna combine a couple of them here. But Susan would like to know, can you recommend the memoirs that you read, the ones about Maria and her children? She'd love to read more about that. Obviously, after she reads Maria, she'd like to read more about her life experience.
Yes, absolutely. They are so good. I have seen people say that they found them they're dated. It's 1939. It's 1972. You're talking about older literature. But when you have the choice to read about someone's life in their own words, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. She also, just a follow-up, did any of the movie cast members, have any of them either reached out? And somebody wants to know if you sent the book to Julie Andrews.
No, my publicist might have. I don't know. As being a thing that my publicist would have done. I think they just send it out into the world to everyone.
Right.
But no, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to wrap up here with just a couple more. So Chrissy, she loves how how widely your books span across geography and time. We've already talked about your research process, but she wants to know what, where, and who is next that you're writing about.
So I have not signed a contract yet. Okay. That is on the very near horizon. I am writing on someone pre-World War I in England, and it has been wonderful to be in the same country as the person I'm writing about, because that's never happened. And this research is going to take me to a great deal of research in Oxford, and I'm very excited about it. I'm sorry I can't speak more about it because I haven't signed the contract, but
well, we have something to look forward to.
Coming up, yeah.
And somebody was asking, and I don't think we talked about this in the green room, but I don't think we talked about it live. While you are here in California, I don't think you're doing any tours that are across are you doing anything in the US as far as touring for the book? anywhere?
I'm not.
Okay.
I mentioned, I'm sure some of my readers know, in May, my mom passed away, and I am actually here for her memorial. But while I'm here, she had a very good life. She was 82, and she reminded me a lot of, she had the same kind of optimism as Julie Andrews and Oscar Hammerstein, Stein, and she was a huge fan of The Sound of Music. She was able to see the book, not read it, but see the book right before she passed. And while I'm here, I am going to go to as many bookstores in Los Angeles as I can to sign stock, and in some of them leave some fun totes, some tote bags. But a tour is not on the cards. Definitely for my next book.
For sure. And we're just so glad you came here and did this virtual event with us. This has been so much fun. Rachel, as always, a great conversation. Thank you. So just real quick before we head out, Michelle, for people who want to follow you, do you do Instagram? Do you do social media?
Instagram, I do Facebook. I am on there every day. I am going to be posting over the next couple of days. I leave back home for England to research my 9th book on Tuesday. But until Tuesday, I'm going to be dropping by bookstores around Los Angeles. And so I'll be posting pictures of the different bookstores where I leave The Sound of Music totes for people who purchase Maria, and sign stock as well. And yes, I can always be found on social media.
Perfect.
And she's Rachel, very kind.
I love it.
She
and
talks
Rachel,
to everybody.
Rachel, as you are too. I think your favorite though is Twitter or X or whatever they call it these days.
I like talking about publishing there a lot. But I'm also my handle everywhere is Rach Kmick, RACHKMC on Instagram, where I talk about the books I'm reading, on Twitter, where I try to give people publishing advice, and I do have a Facebook profile as well. But I just encourage anyone who has further questions to find Michelle. I mean, I have fangirled over her for years, so that's how I connected with her, and I think she's amazing.
And you have what new do you have? We have some things looking forward to from you.
I know. The Liberty Scarf comes out in November. It's a collaborative novel with Janelle Sazowski and Amy Runyon, which is set in Europe in World War I, and my portion is actually Strasbourg and Brussels, which are two of my favorite cities. And it's really romantic, and it's about how a scarf from Liberty of London intertwines 3 different stories. I've got Operation Scarlet, which I've been working on for 4 years, that should have been out by now, but has just taken more rewrites, and is the love of my life / bane of my existence. And that should be out next year sometime. We just don't have a final on that. And then I'm working on a biography of Sir Christopher Wren, the British architect who, this is my favorite story. I wrote a book called The London Restoration, where I went off on just how much I loved his churches, and a nonfiction UK publisher was like, you really do love Wren. And I'm the rare novelist who was like, do you want to write a biography of this guy? And I'm like, oh, the research I never got to put into the book.
Oh, that's amazing.
Exactly. How fun is that?
Yeah, so I've got quite a few books on the horizon.
Best origin story ever.
I know. I love it. I love it. And Rachel, we'll be back here. We'll be back here with Janelle Sazowski.
Oh, for the Winged Tiara. Yes.
Yeah. Next week after next.
Yeah.
So we
come
back and see us.
Julie, we just keep trucking. But everybody go read Maria. It's really special. It's dedicated to Michelle's mother, and give it to your moms and your nanas and your grandmothers and your aunts and your sisters.
And I know that some people may not be able to purchase it from Warwick's, but purchase it from your local independent bookstore. So we appreciate that.
And Warwick's.
If you can, Warwick's, I put it in the chat. If you
in Canada, it's not so easy.
Not so easy.
So that's
we do ship everywhere in the US though. So anyways, Michelle, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation. Love both of you. So everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Michelle, you're amazing. Bye.